This is it. We're gonna take this full site, this one pager, and make the whole thing responsive. The reason we're doing this is while it looks okay on this display and this recording setup, we wanna make sure it responds beautifully on all kinds of devices. Desktop, tablet, mobile landscape, mobile portrait, and of course, Game Boy Color. Let's start on desktop. Now, a lot of people ignore desktop. It's what we design in by default, but the problem is it might look fine in this viewport size, which is 1466. But if we click and grab on the edge right here and resize, we want to see how does it respond as things get more narrow. So a good example of doing this is going throughout the page, grabbing the edge and resizing, seeing how it responds fluidly. So one immediate thing to notice is these things go right up to the edges. So one thing we can do is with our container selected, remember we created this class we're using everywhere. We can say, we can add a certain amount of padding. So if we want to add, let's say 20 pixels on both sides, just holding Option or Alt, we can add 20 pixels of padding on both sides. What does that do? It creates a little bit of breathing room between the edge
and the content.
And the content, that's right. Now, this is 30 pixels in between each of these. We could, on desktop, say, take our container, with any of these containers selected, we could take our container and say, well, on desktop, we can do 30. That might work. So it's even
looks good
across all of them. Everything else, maybe this is a little wide, the hero paragraph. We could just set a maximum width there. We could say 700 pixels, that's okay. That might look a little bit better. Okay, how does the rest of desktop look? Let's see how grabbing the edge. Everything looks pretty good on desktop. Let's move on to tablet. So on tablet, things are going to get a little bit tighter. First off, the sections may have a little too much. By default, they have 60. Let's maybe drop that to
40.
40. So we're just holding down Option or Alt, decreasing both at once. So that's 40. Maybe the big heading can be reduced and
center aligned.
Center aligned and decrease the size a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, 44 pixels. So what just happened? We just changed a couple things. We changed the padding on the section and we changed this big heading. Does that mean it changed everywhere? Well, let's go back to desktop. Desktop is still at 61 and the section is still, the padding is still at 60. Now, why didn't it change on desktop? Changes that we make on tablet, those will pass down. Those changes will pass down to lower breakpoints, to smaller breakpoints, but they won't go back up and pass all the way back up to desktop. Let's keep looking on tablet.
So I noticed something happened to the nav bar. It now has
That's a
hamburger.
Fantastic point. So this menu button was not visible here. In fact, we had these three right here, features, these nav links, request a demo. If we go to tablet, by default, we've switched to a menu button. So how do we do that? Well, let's collapse everything for a second. With our nav bar selected, let's go to element settings and see what happened. By default, the menu icon is going to show up on tablet. So that's where it starts. And of course, it'll happen on mobile. Maybe on tablet, we still want to list it. We can just switch over to mobile. It'll still show these here. And then on mobile, it'll change. Or maybe we want to switch it to desktop. Let's pull all the way back to desktop. And now we have the nav menu on desktop. For us, let's switch just back to tablet so that we have that nav menu. Now, what's inside? Let's click that menu button. And under navbar settings, where it says menu, let's hit show. And this is what it'll show when we open the menu button. So another way to demonstrate that, let's go into preview. So we're in tablet, press this, that's what will show by default. How do we style it? Well, we just showed how to get into it. Let's go to show, and now we can style. Starting with the nav menu itself. Let's go back over to the style panel and let's make the background, let's say, what, a white color?
Yeah.
Do you want to add any shadow or is it fine just solid white?
Solid white.
Solid white, okay. And the nav links, they may work as is. Maybe that rounding on the edge looks a little weird when it's bumped up to the edge here. Maybe we can just remove that radius down to 0. So remember, with combo classes, they're a more specific class. So if we were to just center align with this one, it'll only affect everything that has nav link and CTA. So let's undo and select just a nav link. And we'll center align, so it's center aligned. Let's do the same on the menu button. Let's style that as well. Let's make the menu hamburger icon white background, and we'll just change the font color. This is how we can change that menu icon. We'll just change it to black. Now, at any time, we can go back into our element settings here, into our element settings panel, and with our menu button or our navbar selected, we can toggle show or hide. And of course, that's gonna show or hide our drop-down menu. But let's hit escape real quick to deselect everything, because we can also go and preview our navbar to see what's gonna happen when we press that button. And we can see, press the button, it opens up. Press the button again, it closes. Press the button, opens up. Press the button, you get the idea. Let's check the rest of tablet. So far the hero is looking okay. The trusted by is looking okay. 6 across still works here. If we wanted some more space, we could add it, but that looks okay. Maybe this is 3 across, looks fine on tablet.
Yep.
If we've decreased the size of this big heading, maybe on our feature heading, we want to decrease that a little bit, but that actually may be okay. Down here.
Let's change the gap to 10 pixels.
Okay, on the form?
Yeah.
So to do that, let's go up and take a look at our gap settings, and we'll change to 10 pixels.
Sounds good.
And that might be it for tablet. Looking good on tablet. Again, not just checking how it looks when we switch to tablet, but checking the fluidity and adjusting. And you can see down here, there will be different previews for different types of devices that show up. So these will help you lock in. You can see at the bottom, it'll help you lock in to different device sizes. But that, of course, is tablet. Let's go over to mobile landscape and let's take a look. So in mobile, we might want to decrease that section padding even more, as there's very limited real estate in a mobile landscape screen. So let's go down to 10, maybe 20 pixels.
Yeah, 20 looks good.
And then the heading, notice 2 things. It's not just the size, it's also that height, that line height. So we might want to decrease that line height as well. Decrease that heading size. How's that look?
Looks good.
Okay. And we can always test that fluidity on mobile landscape as well. So one more thing to note, if we look up here, the brand block on mobile landscape by default has 10 pixels of padding. Let's go into that 10 pixels and set it to 0. Of course, if we go to mobile portrait, it still says 0 pixels. That's good. Okay, what about the vertical alignment here? Maybe on the logo itself, we had 14 pixels before. It'll look better at about 17 pixels. We can eyeball that and see the rest. So we're looking good here. Trusted by looks fine on this one. We might want to wrap that on mobile portrait.
Yeah.
Maybe trusted by is a little large. Decrease a little bit. Features for every need. We're kind of getting to that spot where it looks almost as big as the H1. Let's change this to, 25? You can always eyeball it, Option or Alt, and adjust. 24, 25 looks okay. Decrease that line height as well. And then, of course, we're going to need some love on this section here. So a couple things we could do. One, we can go into Edit Our Grid, and where we have 3 columns on tablet, maybe we only want 2 columns here. And maybe we want to decrease that column distance to, let's see, 20 pixels, 15 pixels? 20 looks okay.
20.
So we adjust. This looks okay. Looks good. Maybe on the heading 3, remember, we didn't add a class to this. We can just edit the tag and say we want H3s on mobile landscape. Go in to edit all H3s. Maybe those should be
18?
18, yeah, 18, and decrease that line height as well. Looking pretty good. So just adjust that. Looks good. Let's go down here. That H2 is looking a little bit large. Again, we have feature heading here, 25 pixels. Let's go down to this. In fact, what we could do, we could say all H2 headings are going to be 25 pixels by default. And what that's going to do is, because this is also an H2, we could just remove that size. We could remove it and it still stays 25 pixels. Why? Because it's coming from all H2 headings. We can always set properties like that. Paragraph, this is a little tight down here.
Yeah.
So maybe for the form, quick fix, we could just switch it to vertical and we're done. That's it. All right, mobile.
It looks horrible.
Oh, it does look horrible. That's true. A couple things we could change here. One, let's stretch. So it's everything is by default taking up full width. And the second thing we could do is nothing, because it looks pretty good. No, the button should have a little more margin on the top. Let's go maybe 10. How's that look?
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
And the footer, still looking pretty good. Let's see what happens when it gets really narrow. It's getting tight, but it's not bad. We could say the link block here, we could just decrease that column gap a little bit to like 16 pixels. Okay, and we'll do a design review later. We might have missed stuff. That's okay, we'll get that later. But that's mobile landscape. Let's go to our final breakpoint. And over in mobile portrait, we can see it's getting a little tight, especially in the hero section. So let's start there. First off, big heading. Might make sense to make this even smaller.
Yep.
Maybe 32, decrease that line height as well. And on the section, we still have 20. Maybe in this point we need 10. Center align, you think, the button?
Yeah.
Okay, center align the content. How's that look?
Looks better. We could also decrease the size here.
Oh, decrease the size of this. The thing to note on container is we always have that, 30 pixels? Maybe starting back here on mobile landscape, and we'll make sure container and not container centered is selected. Select container, maybe decrease to 20? Little Yeah, a little less, and that looks okay. Of course, that passed down here. You're saying decrease the size of the button?
No, it actually looks good now.
Okay. Here's what it looks like when it gets a lot tighter.
Oh, yeah, it's a little bit tight.
Let's maybe decrease the padding to 10 and the padding on the left and right to 20. That's only going to matter. That'll only be apparent when we're getting a little more narrow. How's that look?
Yeah, looks better.
Okay. So app icon looks okay. These are getting somewhat small.
A little bit small.
So maybe instead of, we could do logo holder, edit that, and delete 3 of these columns. So we kind of have a 3x2 set up in terms of columns and rows. It's a little tight. So if we go in, this is that section. It is a little tight, so maybe 10 was too much there. Maybe back to 20.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We could add a little more if those are getting a little large. We also could add a little more in that grid. A little more of a column gap there. Maybe 30 by 30. We can adjust this later, perfect it. Okay. Features for every need, this H2. It's a lot of space. So that feature grid, we put 60. In fact, let's go back to mobile landscape. We can decrease that a little bit. Let's decrease to what, 30?
Yeah.
And then go back to mobile portrait. How does that look? That looks okay. Maybe it's 2 across, too tight here.
Yeah.
So in the feature grid, let's go in and edit, delete 1 column. Boom. Now it's set up in 1 column so we can go through all of our features, including Daily Digest, AI Assistant. And here's a really important note. We've talked about styles, but what about content? With AI Assistant, let's do capital A for Assistant. And what happens? Does that only capitalize the A on mobile portrait? No. If we go back up to even desktop, it's capitalized. And that's a really important note. Content, changes to content, will affect all breakpoints. It'll affect desktop, tablet, mobile landscape, mobile portrait. It'll affect all of them. So if we delete something like this heading, it doesn't just delete it on desktop, it deletes it everywhere. Undo, if we delete something on mobile portrait, it doesn't just delete it on mobile portrait, it deletes it everywhere. Undo again. So styling passes down in that one direction we talked about before, but changes to content and structure will affect all breakpoints, all content. Let's keep going down and adjust and check fluidity here. Request a demo. Okay, so a couple things. The most obvious one is this footer link block. It's getting a little tight. So we could here just turn on wrap, and that'll wrap to the next line these links. We could also uncheck here, and we can decrease our row distance. Let's make sure, one thing to note, these text links, they might be clickable on desktop, but on tablet, when you're using a crude instrument like a fingertip to touch this, you really need a better tap target size. So let's actually increase the padding on the top so that we're increasing that tap target. So now there's a clickable or touchable, tappable region that's a little easier to access for something like a fingertip. And that'll pass down, of course, here on mobile landscape. Let's make sure that still works. It does. And mobile portrait, now we see what's going on. And we can decrease, again, on that footer link block. Let's decrease that row height a little bit. So now we're just relying on the padding as that clickable thing. Everything is responsive, regardless of that width. We can go really narrow and we can go really wide and test what it'll look like on different types of devices. But that's mobile portrait. So if we want, we can always roll through all these changes. So we can go to preview mode right over here, and we can click and drag on the boundary and adjust through all of our breakpoints. So we can really see how fluid and responsive the whole thing is. We tested and we adjusted, of course, on desktop. We did the same on tablet, mobile landscape, mobile portrait, and of course, Post-it Mini. Up next, we'll go deep on this page to design interactions and animations.
A lot of people don't know the secret. Not only does a responsive design ensure things look great on all devices. Oh no, responsive design gives you power! Whether you're customizing the one we did here, or it's your own design, upload a video of your responsive site to Twitter using hashtag Webflow101. We'll pick our favorite responsive sites and fly you out to our annual conference where you'll meet designers, developers, and Webflow engineers.